1. I used to sling pizza, and I had this one couple who would regularly come in and order a specialty pizza, think meat lovers, but with 3 times the amount of toppings. Like extra everything, plus they would add extra of other toppings that weren't originally on that pizza, like olives and onions. So of course, this meant that it never cooked thoroughly, even after sending it through the oven twice. Every single time they would complain about the pizza being so burnt on the edges and not cooked enough, and it took too long and they wanted more of the toppings. I tried repeatedly to explain to them that every extra topping you add makes the portion size of all the toppings go down. I don't even understand why they were allowed to add so many toppings onto the register. Anyways, about the 5th or 6th time I replaced the pizza for them because they kept complaining to corporate and received credit, the man came in again and said they spoke to corporate and corporate wants me to make the pizza the way they want it. I knew that isn't true. There really wasn't a corporate customers could call, just a call center, and those people did not care. But I decided I'd do exactly what they asked, and made sure to explain to them that if I made it their way and it didn't turn out well, they wouldn't be getting any more remakes. I took the order and made it as they were expecting, kind of. I put full portions of each topping on that monster. To say that the pizza was a fucking mountain is an understatement. It didn't even fit in the oven. I had to take toppings off. I did feel a little bad at this point, knowing full well they paid with the store credit over $40 for this one pizza, and there was no way it would even cook properly. So I did give it 2 runs through the oven, but that still didn't help. It was pan-to-pan topping, so getting it out of the pan sucked, and I just cut it right in the box so the toppings wouldn't fall everywhere. After I cut, the slices disappeared under the toppings, and you couldn't even see the crust, so it just looks like a giant pile of trash toppings dumped in a box. I couldn't even close it. I brought it to the customer, and he started to lose it on me, saying it took too long, and it looked like a mess, and he wanted another credit. I pulled out his receipt and asked which part wasn't up to par. He said it didn't look cooked, and I reminded him how I warned him of that with this amount of toppings. And I would have cooked it longer if he hadn't been complaining about the time. I also showed him the at-home cooking times and temps on the box. I showed him the crust underneath and went through all the toppings and extras. Everything was accounted for as he asked for it, so I told him I'd let management and corporate know that it was made to his liking. Never saw them again. 2. The leaf collection company for my neighborhood has absurdly strict rules about where leaves must be for pickup. I live at the end of a cul-de-sac, so my curb is curved and pretty short, about 30 feet or 9 meters long. My property is wedge-shaped, so my backyard is quite long, 200 feet or 60 meters, and has about 40 to 50 oak trees. I also have 2 sugar maples in my front yard, so leaves. Lots of leaves. Pickup rules state leaves must be within 5 feet of the curb, but on the road. They must also be at least 15 feet from a mailbox, because subscriptions for leaf pickup are by individual homeowner. Neighbors are not allowed to combine leaves and cannot buy a group subscription. Subscribers must only put their leaves from the current year out for pickup. Pickup trucks use GPS to identify homes who have signed up and ignore leaves in front of homes that did not sign up. Because I have so many leaves and so little curb, only 15 feet of available curb due to the required distance from a mailbox, I called the leaf collection company and asked to put the leaves along a longer curb I share with my neighbor. "No problem," they said. Great. The truck came through and picked up a fraction of the pile and left the rest of the pile the driver decided was in front of my neighbor's property. I called the company back, and a different person said those are the rules. I'll just have to figure it out. Fine. Now it's on. I have 15 feet of width and 5 feet of depth. There is, however, no limit on height. I moved the remaining leaves to my available curb space. I collected the rest of my leaves and added them to the pile. I spoke with my neighbors and acquired the rights to their leaves by paying them $1 each. Now they are all my leaves. I shoveled, swept the leaves off the streets. They went on the pile. I collected and purchased leaves from the neighbors. They went on the pile. Leaves continued to fall, so I kept adding them. It was a lot of work, but the pile was over 12 feet tall. I spent a ton of time using a snow shovel to fling the leaves on the top of the pile that was more than 5 feet above my shed. Neighborhood residents stopped to gape at the epic leaf mound. I am happy to battle willful ignorance with malicious compliance. I reminded myself of this every time I spent another hour tending to the obscenity on my curb. The truck came today. The pile dwarfed the truck. They had to drive away, dump leaves, then come back and reload. Twice. 3. This story took place quite a while ago, but something reminded me of it, and I thought I'd share. I was working remotely in a company with co-workers from all over the world, and the culture there was actually quite nice. I really enjoyed everyone I got in contact with in all my time there. I'd never experienced any bad blood between anyone. To put simply, everyone was very understanding of each other and open-minded. Enter a guy who I'll call Jose for simplicity. You see, Jose had a special character in his name, something that I'd noticed but never really addressed because why would I? When emailing him, tagging him in different places, etc., his name obviously didn't carry that special character, but he still used it on our messaging platform. One day, I needed to send him a private message, and I started off with a simple, "Hey, Jose." He did mention that he'd like me to spell his name correctly, and I honestly thought it was all in good fun, but I explained that I'd never used that character before in writing. My keyboard wasn't set up for it, etc. I thought that was the end of that, but apparently no. I wasn't immediately pulled aside by a higher-up, but during a one-on-one meeting later, I was told I should be mindful of people's names. I could tell the person delivering this news wasn't thrilled about it, but the issue had been escalated nonetheless, so they had to remind me. I thought nothing of it since I had very little to do with Jose anyway. But lo and behold, a couple of months later, I had to message him again, this time in a group setting. After a little back and forth, I thanked everyone individually for their input, and because I had forgotten about the name incident before, I simply said thank you, Jose. You can imagine that during my next one-on-one, this issue was brought up again. This time I was a little miffed, but I said, "You know what, you're right, I'm clearly in the wrong here. You malicious compliance. You see, my name also has a special character, but it's not a frequently seen one since I'm from an Eastern European country. Safe to say that nobody else in the company even knew of its existence. I'd also assured people they can call me by my English name, which is much easier to pronounce. Well, not anymore. During that same one-on-one, I told my higher-up how I expect everyone to call me by my correct name, special character and all. Would you be surprised if I told you that Jose was one of the first to complain that my special character isn't easily accessible on his keyboards? He actually had the audacity to contact me privately to complain that his name was a special case, since it's more widely used, and the special character is well known, whereas mine isn't. And I shouldn't feel special about it. To make matters worse, the next time I had to write down his name, and I made sure I did it often, I didn't actually type it down and instead copied and pasted it from Google. And it would always, without fail, paste the Wikipedia article about his name too. So my messages looked clunky as hell. Nobody judged me for it, and Jose avoided me like the plague whenever he could. Trouble was, he needed me more than I needed him, so he was forced to suffer by writing out my name properly, far, far more often than I guess he expected. 4. Several years ago, I used to work at an agency that hired us out as short-term temporary workers and contractors. These jobs pretty much consisted of stuff that company employees couldn't be bothered to do, and so got someone in to sort out. It wasn't great, but I had to make ends meet. Anyway, one of these jobs was for 150 hours at 5 weeks of office administration. There wasn't much more information to go on, but a job's a job. The office turned out to be quite a small, stuffy little building at the back of an industrial estate. I was told to report to Beryl. When I turned up, I was met by a rather grumpy-looking old lady having a cigarette by the front door. This was Beryl. Beryl didn't even say hello or ask me my name, but showed me in, pointed to an enormous pile of boxes full of paperwork, saying,
"This all needs to be scanned in. There are 2 scanners connected to a computer there. Off you go. Let someone know if you need help."
So off I went. For to kick ass, that pile of boxes was to be my job for the next month and a bit. Joy. The office was predominantly young men, with Beryl being the only other woman. She was in her 50s and spent more time smoking than working, and without being rude, clearly didn't look after herself. It was quite flattering to have a bunch of these guys pop by my workstation to chat occasionally. After a few days of scanning, Beryl visited my cubicle. She wasn't happy that I spent too much time talking, and not enough time working. I was confused. While I didn't have any metrics or targets, I was pretty consistently working through this mountain of paperwork. I got the impression that Beryl didn't like the attention I was getting. I pointed out to her that I haven't left my desk apart from to go to the toilet. If someone's over here to talk to me, then that's fine, as I can talk and scan at the same time, like I'm doing right now. She wasn't happy and turned away, calling out,
"Just do your job,"
as she left. Some of the other guys had heard this, and they popped by my desk later and said not to worry. They'd had agency staff before, and Beryl always hated it if a young woman arrived, because she was grumpy and jealous, not my words. In fact, a few years ago, one young woman had left the office in tears because Beryl had tore her a new one for going to lunch with some of the other guys. Naturally, this annoyed me, particularly because Beryl thought she could bully and disrespect agency staff, and I certainly wasn't going to leave the job because of an angry bitch. Malicious compliance number 1. For the rest of my time there, I made sure to get dressed up, makeup, curls, and midi office dress, stiletto heels. When Beryl saw me clicking my way down to the office the next day, fully dressed up just to scan some paperwork, she scowled at me but didn't say anything. The next week, Beryl took some time out of her busy smoking schedule to visit me in my cubicle, the second time she'd done so since I started. Some of the paperwork I was scanning in had been stapled together, so I asked someone in the office for a staple remover and a stapler. I used to pull out the staple, scan the document, rename it on the computer, then restaple it and put it back in the box. I was just pulling a staple out when Beryl walked by. Beryl's first words to me were,
"What are you doing?"
I replied that this document was stapled. If I put it in the machine, it'd jam. She raised her voice very slightly and said,
"Nobody told you to do that. Just scan each page in separately. Leave the papers alone."
I could almost hear her eye roll as she walked away. Malicious compliance number 2, so I did. Scanned everything with staples, just folded over, then created folders called Document 1, 2, 3, and each scan went in as page 1, 2, 3, page 1.pdf, 1, 2, 3, page 2.pdf. You get the idea. This slowed me down a lot, but hey, it's what I was asked to do. At some point, Beryl walked by and saw me flipping pages like that. I put my hair in a bun and taken my heels off, and she smirked. She thought she'd flustered me and that I didn't see her reaction. Don't worry, Beryl, you didn't, and I did. The paperwork I was scanning in was boxed up newest first, so I got to some of the older papers that had been moved around a couple of times and were slightly scrunched up or folded or similar. A jammed scanner wasn't an issue, it had happened a handful of times before. But as I got to the older papers, the jams became more frequent. It was an easy sort, though. Just open the back door of the scanner, roll the paper out, cancel the job, and redo it. At this point, I had gone back to unstapling and restapling because Beryl had given me some space thinking she'd broken me, and I just wanted to get the job done so I could leave. Beryl walked in one day. This would have been my 4th week there. She saw me unjamming the scanner and flipped her top. She yelled,
"Mel, what are you doing?"
At this point, all heads in the office turned to where we were. I calmly told her, "The scanner's jammed. I'm just pulling the paper out so I can rescan it. Shouldn't take me more than a few minutes." She continued yelling,
"At no point were you instructed to perform IT repairs. We have someone for that. Stop what you're doing and get someone to help you. I asked you this when you started. Why can't you follow simple instructions?"
It took a lot of patience not to argue back with her, which I thought was what she wanted. But I said, "Okay, fine. Can I speak to the IT guy to sort this out?" I couldn't have choreographed her response better. I then knew that she did want me to argue so she could kick me out, because she hesitated and said, "Well, the IT guy's out for the rest of the week." This was Thursday. "Use the other scanner. If you jam it, let me know," and stormed off. Malicious compliance number 3. I knew her diary and knew she was off the next day, Friday. I carried on with the one scanner, making sure it didn't jam that day, and waited until the next morning. Coincidentally, the scanner jammed on the first piece of paper I fed into it. Who'd have thought? Obviously, I rang Beryl. She didn't answer her phone, and as she wasn't in the office, I spent the day sat around without much to do. Whilst talking to the guys in the office, I learned that the company had been bought by a much larger IT firm, and they just wanted the rights to the proprietary software they had developed. It also turned out that the CEO of the small company basically paid himself into retirement and appointed Beryl as the director. Beryl knew that her days were numbered, so she was even more bitter to the staff. The guys working there had been committed various levels of careers with the new IT firm, which they were happy with. As I was told, 120,000 employees, 30 dev roles are easy to find. One director role is not. Anyway, when we returned on Monday, you could almost see the vein in her neck throbbing. She'd wasted an entire day of whatever her company paid my agency because little old me wasn't trusted to fix a paper jam. I used to get in a little later than the rest of the staff. Agency perks, woo. But when I got in, she'd had the IT champion perform a skilled job of opening a scanner and pulling a piece of paper out. She didn't even look at me when she said,
"Scanners are fixed. Get on with your job and don't mess around."
At this point, you might be thinking, SML, this is a lot of text for some pretty trivial malicious compliance. Well, you'll like the final part. My last week there coincided with a new contract that the company had been given by their new owners. I assume it was some sort of litmus test. Whilst I don't pretend to understand what it was, the job involved a lot of scanning documents that had been handwritten. Hooray, more boxes. At the same time, a few of the guys who worked there were going on a visit to the new parent company, which were based in the USA. I live in the UK. The IT champion was one of these guys who went. When the boxes were delivered to my cubicle, Beryl popped by and said, "These take priority. All of what I said to you is more important than ever. Do not mess around, otherwise you're out the door. Am I clear?" Yes, ma'am. The paperwork delivered was from the USA. Our paper sizes are different. The first piece of paper I fed into the scanner jammed it, a safety lock, because it expected A4 and got US letter instead. I jammed both scanners, Beryl not being one to turn down a free trip to America had gone with them. I rang her at 11 a.m. UK time, which was 5 a.m. their time. She picked up and was not impressed. I felt sorry for the folks adjacent to her hotel room. When she screamed down the phone,
"You've done what? How? Why?"
I tell her about the USA paperwork.
"Can you not fix it?"
Final malicious compliance. No. You've told me many times that I can't fix these machines. What's the business continuity plan? Side note, my brother told me that phrase, and he still doesn't quite understand why I turned up to his house a bit later with a few pizzas and a box of beer. Beryl had no idea what to do. She was clearly flustered.
"Can you just do what you can? We need this done."
What would you want me to do?
Can you fix these scanners? Because this is really important.
I'm sorry, you told me I can't do that. I need simple instructions to work with.
Just fix it.
I'd be happy to show an IT specialist where the scanners are, if you can get them here to fit. She hangs up. Well, that's that then. I spent the rest of the week chatting to my colleagues, updating my CV and applying for jobs. Nobody had turned up to fix the scanners. When my final week finished, I said bye to the guys I'd worked with, wished them luck, and left with none of the critical paperwork scanned in. When Beryl got back from her business trip, I learned that she spent one day at the parent company and left it to the other guys. When the shit hit the fan because nothing was being delivered, they wondered where she was. This was day 2 of the 5-day business trip. She was at a spa. Phone switched off. She flew out early on day 5 without seeing any of her other colleagues or the parent company. I kept in touch with a few of the guys afterwards. After this, the dev guys were transferred contracts for the larger IT firm. They all got a very small salary increase, but were also able to work from home. This was pre-COVID, so it was a bit of a rarity back then. Beryl, meanwhile, didn't fare so well. She was initially offered redundancy, paid including pension deals, but when someone complained that she'd not been present for the meetings, which I think was their IT champion, they found out she'd been sightseeing, shopping, tanning, and getting her hair done on company time. She ended up being fired. No bonus, no pension, nothing. I quit the agency not long afterwards after 1 or 2 moves, ended up in a job I'm very happy with. The agency were none the wiser about any of this. They just wanted their money, and aside from one initial checkup call, left me to it. 5. This goes back quite a few years. Myself, my friend Joe, and our friend Jess decided to go bowling one night. When we got there, we bought 4 games each and ordered food and drinks. It was about an hour and a half before our lane was ready, so we just chilled at the bar and didn't really keep track of time. When our lane opened up, we headed over and started our first game. We ordered quite a few beers and wings and had to wipe our hands off before touching the bowling ball each frame. We were also having a great time just catching up, so by the time closing was near, we had only bowled 2 games. We had encountered this before, and our regular place had a very good policy. Any games you didn't bowl, they gave you a card to use next time. This allowed them to close up and guaranteed you'd come back. Well, when I went up to the desk, I was informed that any games we didn't bowl before we left were non-refundable and no credit would be given. When I brought up that we paid before we found out it would be an hour and a half wait, and we spent a couple hundred there that night, he told me he was the owner, that was his policy, and by bowling there, I agreed to abide by it. I told him we didn't have time to finish the games. He smiled smugly and replied, "We won't kick you out. You can stay and finish your game." Now I was exhausted by this point, as were Joe and Jess. However, we were also stubborn in our late 20s and quite a few beers in. So I checked my watch, saw we had 20 minutes to close, ordered 2 more pitchers of beer at the bar, and walked back to our lane. We played every single frame of that game and took our sweet time in doing so. I kept looking over at the owner at the desk, and it was clear he was not happy. They couldn't begin to clean until we left, and we showed no signs of slowing down. As we started our second game, I saw him pick up a phone and start talking to someone, gesturing towards us with a frustrated expression on his face. We finally departed the bowling alley 3 hours after closing time. I smiled, thanked him for staying, and told him to have a great night. He muttered something under his breath that I didn't hear. Between the hangover and the 4 games of bowling, I could not move my arms the next day. Joe and Jess did not fare much better. Upon our next visit to the bowling alley, we found a large posted sign that stated, "No new game was to be started within half an hour of closing, and any remaining games would be credited to your account for future visits." Knowing that our stubborn, petty act of defiance made things better for the patrons was totally worth the pain the next 2 days. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge's Ice Cream, episode 200. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video, and a big thanks to everybody else in the preceding 199 videos who also allowed me to use their stories. And thank you to you, the subscribers who have kept watching over the years. And also thanks to the people that are no longer watching, but that did watch in the past, but they won't hear this because they're not watching anymore. Thank you too for watching when you did. Okay, let's see. My brain's not working anymore. But that's fine. I don't need it for the rest of the night. I don't think we have any other shouty out, so let's just move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, what is a favorite musician that you only discovered in the past couple of years that you can't believe you weren't enjoying longer? My favorite is Phoebe Bridgers. Favorite album of hers is Stranger in the Alps, Deluxe Edition. And it's something I have on repeat. Just relaxing, working, whatever. It's good to have there. Always. Very soothing, very interesting, and nicely written as well. But I'm always looking for new musicians to check out, and I look forward to seeing your suggestions in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. I hear the sofa calling me. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.